Where I started for me, I was very much the hyperactive kid in school that just did every sport under the sun. So for me, early on, there was very much a competitive nature there that just got me really involved in, I need to do on the work in the dark in order to show up as my best on the day, and just getting used to that sort of delayed gratification early on. Is we've had clients, lose a 10, 15, 20, 25 kilos while eating more food.
So today I have the honor to introduce Olly Wood. Olly got started in the business world after 7 years as an independent personal trainer. He started online, but rapidly built a company to over 15 staff in his mid-20s, helping thousands of clients upgrade their body, energy, and productivity through his 4-step system that he's agreed to share with us in this episode. It was pretty bloody phenomenal to hear from him. His unique perspective of both running a multi-7-figure company and understanding the behavioral nuances of what truly makes health habits stick after working with thousands of clients has allowed him to create his own category in the health market of working with busy professionals that I want to share with you guys today. So before we dive into today's episode, if you're gaining value from these episodes, or if you're tuning in for the first time, welcome. Make sure you hit that follow button for more updates and episodes with incredible guests. If you could take a moment to leave a quick review, because like I've said multiple times, reviews are like currency now. It helps us continue to get the incredible guests that we've had on so far and are continuing to reach out to bring more value to you guys in all fields that are going to help you be the best version of yourself, focusing on physical fitness, mental fitness, and present state spirituality. My name is Lachlan Stuart. That's enough for me. Let's dive into today's episode with Olly Wood. The Man That Can Project podcast, a podcast empowering career-driven men to live more fulfilling lives. We are here to challenge your beliefs, redefine success, and talk about the important stuff in a relatable way. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. My name's Lachlan Stuart. Let's get into it. Olly, great to have you here, mate, and I'm really loving your moustache. It's looking great.
Appreciate being on, dude. It's got 2 more days to go. This is the longest I've ever grown out, and it's tickling my nose, getting on top of my lip, all that good stuff.
I saw when I was watching one of your Instagram videos where you're like, I've grown the mo, and then I just realized I've committed to doing it for a whole month, and I've never done that before. But mate, it suits you.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's the thing I didn't realize is, yes, I'm growing out the mo, but it's actually highlighted how much I need to maintain the rest, because I'm very much someone who just shaves on Monday and then waits till the end of the week. One less thing to focus on, right? But I've had to maintain a lot more and haven't really done so for today.
Mate, I love it. And I can definitely relate to when you get the rogue whiskers going up your nose and you're like, what is this frustrating thing? And it makes you want to clipper it back. I used to have a beard for legitimately like 8 years, and I woke up one day and I was like, it's got to go. So now I've just been clippering, and it feels weird to not have it, but that's not what we're here to talk about. It is Movember. It is Men's Health Month, which is important to talk about. And you're definitely going to give so much insight on things that, especially men and women, but majority of our audience are men, can do to improve their quality of life. And you're successful in business. You've got an incredible moustache, and you're practicing what you preach. Can you give us a bit of a background, Olly, on how you got into the health space and who you are, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Where I started for me, I was very much the hyperactive kid in school that just did every sport under the sun. So for me, early on, there was very much a competitive nature there that just got me really involved in, I need to do on the work in the dark in order to show up as my best on the day, and just getting used to that sort of delayed gratification early on. But I think taking the time to look at it through the space of one diet doesn't work for everyone, but one diet for me, depending on what sport or whatever endeavor I was after, wasn't going to work, right? What that looks like for a bodybuilding show versus a rowing event, or focusing all day on work like I've been doing today, is entirely different. So that was a really, like, early on, seeing those different spaces from moving from a very endurance-based sport to more strength. Moving into uni, I was actually, diving into more of a business degree and very much wanting to go down the corporate route. But found myself doing a couple of bodybuilding shows in the middle of uni, as you do, which just fully transitioned me back into the personal training space. At that point, I invested in my first coach, spent a couple grand on my first coach at 17. I knew that I didn't know everything, and I needed to start learning pretty quick. But what that meant for the next 3 or 4 years in the personal training space was I was just obsessed about like perfecting exercise, right, and building out the progression, optimizing, movement angles, all of that stuff. And as I started to build my way up the ranks of being a well-known PT in the area, I started to work with more executives and CEOs and people that are in high-flying positions in a corporate space. And I just became more and more aware that I was working with such a small piece of the puzzle to actually get results moving forward, right? They were stressed, they were inflamed, they weren't sleeping, they were still thinking about the last work meeting. And taking the time to consciously focus on movement was one thing, but needing to tick the box of leaving the gym being all sweaty was the last thing from them actually being healthy moving forward, right? So the natural progression of what that looked like, my mindset around, you either get to invest time or money, became very early on. I was like, well, I want to get these results quicker. I want to learn what's actually going on. And knowing all the avenues that we're probably going to discuss today, I needed a 10-year degree in all of those avenues to really feel like I knew what I was talking about, right? We all know that as soon as we learn something, we realize how much we don't know. It was just going through that progression over and over again. So our natural progression from going from an in-person training facility to an online platform where we could integrate all of those with actual specialists in those spaces as opposed to Olly's knowledge very much just became a necessity out of the kind of service I wanted to provide, and understanding that when you really get involved in that business and entrepreneurial space, there's a real disconnect between health and business. And I think where that comes from is there's a level of all or nothing in business where it tends to work and it tends to work for you, right? You succeed, you start to see that working. But in the health space, it's very much a continual failing, right? Whether you're lifting a dumbbell in the gym, you work to failure. If it's a nutrition plan, it's not about perfecting it all of the time because you'll feel like a robot. It's about not slipping up too often. And how do we find the balance? And I think there's a real disconnect just from an approach and mindset level that we see so many clients come through the door with that starts with I need to be more disciplined. I need to have more willpower. And you're just beating yourself up about it all day rather than looking at what actually needs to change. So bit of a longer answer, but getting an idea of just understanding what creates change, what that looked like for me personally, and then how I could actually facilitate that in a business environment was very much how that progression started.
That's epic. And you touched on a few you highlighted a few things that really stood out to me. Obviously, the first one being investing in yourself. You did that from a young age and thousands of dollars. My first investment in myself was to a personal development event, and it was $25, and I was weighing up, that's a box of beer, or do I go to this event? And I'm very grateful that I did. And the investments have obviously scaled ever since, and you understand the return on investment. Where did that come from for you from a young age, rather than just going, no, I can figure this out for myself, as opposed to just going, look, I'm going to hire a coach and fast track my results?
I really don't know. For me, being in that sporting space, I'd had a coach since I was 4, so I knew that I was always learning off someone. I think I was relatively coachable, and especially when I got into the rowing space, somehow I found my way into the sort of first 8 crew when I was a year or 2 below, right? So I was that guy just having to prove himself, realizing he was smaller and much less experienced than anyone else in the crew, that I just had to be an absolute sponge to get to that place I needed to be. So I think there was just embedded levels of competitiveness, showing up the right way, making sure I could play on the same level as these guys that were clearly ahead of me. I had to speak to the coaches. I had to make sure I was just doubling down on everything I could do. So when it became about my own personal business and the results that I put on the table, I think that just became quite natural. For me, a second aspect that's there, I think, is just a level of how you do one thing's out, how you do everything, I think is shown through a ton, but just the quality of the work. Like if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And I think that really came from my dad. He ran his own business and has for a very long time too. And I think just that ownership mindset around like, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it well. There's no half-assing. I think that was embedded very quickly.
It's a great mindset to have, that ownership mindset, and definitely something I've adopted over the years, because there's so many, well, basically how you've built your whole business is getting in experts to fulfill the need or fulfill those areas outside of yourself, rather than trying to do multiple 10-year degrees, as you mentioned. When you were touching on before as well, eating differently is not just for every different body type, but also to specific goals. I think, can we dive into that a little bit more? How did you get or how did that come to your fruition? And what are some, I guess, some key things for high performers that you feel is lacking maybe in their diet or the way they set up their day for success?
Yeah, for me, it really became real working with coaches through a bodybuilding setting, which may sound typical, but I did it for a very different reason. And I think for me, it was always the process of you're kind of trying to do two extremes, right? You're trying to put on as much muscle as possible while also dropping as much fat as possible, which right away you start to get some very real results around like how do you adjust these certain things, right? For example, I knew that if I went really high carbohydrate in my diet, I could recover really well. I was really strong in the gym, but I couldn't get any work done all day because I was just sleepy, right? Whereas if I went sort of a high fat option, I found that I was much more focused through the day, but I didn't nearly have that top 1 or 2% when I was really trying to train. So it was trying to lean towards what was really the goal of the time. Going through a bodybuilding progression, going from 12% body fat down to 4% body fat, there's a couple of things that really shift through that process. And I found even going through more of a higher fat phase to really get the work done. And then as I got to a certain level of body fat, somewhere around that 6 to 5% body fat, I could switch to a higher carbohydrate and I'd see body fat just drop off me, right? So all of these different signals coming through of how to manipulate nutrition in a body composition standpoint was very the first like eye-opening, like, well, that actually makes a difference. It's not just, 2,000 calories. It's like, what is that made up of? And then really the progression of that till now, I've had 6 or 7 decent concussions. That put me in a space of understanding the benefits of more of a ketogenic style diet, or at least higher fat, in a space where I could maintain a high level of brain function through that day. And it seems to be very beneficial in that restorative space. My partner and now fiance has epilepsy, right? So there's a level of research around the brain protective benefits of keto and understanding that as well. And of course, now working with a couple of thousand clients, you start to understand there's some nuances and adjustments that not just body fat and activity level, but really brain function, what the actual goal is, I think is something that really makes a big difference. And, you probably see this in your space a lot now too, where people are getting ready to be healthy or they're trying to drop body fat. But there's a really big difference between longevity, like a lifespan, health span, and performance span, right? And it's trying to get an idea of which one are you leaning towards. Because if it's purely lifespan, there might be a reduction in protein. There might be really moderating the amount of intensity you add into your day. If it's performance span, it's the exact opposite extreme, right? Going for a run for 3 or 5Ks a couple times a week is really healthy. But if you're now getting ready for a marathon, that's very much leaning towards performance span, not necessarily health or lifespan. But it's really modulating what the goal is and over what time period is going to allow that nuance to come in around what type of dietary approaches or adjustments we're going to make to that individual.
How do you get your clients, for example, to dial in? Do they come to you with a specific goal, or are there people who just go, "Hey, I want to improve my life. I'm not really sure what that would look like from a dietary standpoint, from a output, physical output standpoint." Do you sort of help guide them to get clear on those specific goals? Because from my experience as well, a lot of people do lack being very specific in what they're looking for. So they may be trying to get a promotion in their career, and then they're also coming into the gym wanting to train like an elite athlete, and you're like, mate, just because you see people doing this on Instagram, it's probably not going to help you with your career because you're fully, gassing yourself here.
100%. No one in our program has got into a program without a 40-minute interview to really understand like what the goal is and what this looks like moving forward. Doesn't matter if you've got a pulse and a credit card. That's where most people finish. It's taking the time to get an idea of what that goal is. We specifically work with business owners, contractors, and sole traders. So we get an idea of like there already has to be a business component there. And I think that's really important to understand when there's a level of career drive that really we focus on and harness, because I think it can be an asset. And in most spaces, and certainly what I found in a personal training space, is for many people, they see that as a deterrent, as the enemy, as you're working too much. You need to focus on your health. But I think a conversation that, we try refresh in a different way is, when you show up for you, when you front load those buckets to actually show up in your day the way you want to be, everyone gets more out of you, right? You're more productive, you're more focused, you stop forgetting those details in the meeting, you come home, you've still got energy for the kids. That's the space we're working in, and understanding, aligning the two, right? Challenging yourself before the day challenges you. Mm-hmm. It's all of these mindset shifts of taking control of your health again allows you to take control of your day. So I think from a prerequisite. I think that's an important part of it. And then we really refine what the goal is all about, because it's very really just fat loss, right? The goal is not just seeing the scale go from 105 to 100 and then 95. It's what does that actually do for how you show up, how confident you are, what that looks like in your clothes. Do you feel good at the end of the day? And really understanding, as you mentioned, what does that look like in a performance space? Is there some blood markers or some drugs that you've been prescribed that just are bringing on all these weird symptoms? You have an acid reflux. Like, those are the things that really get in the way of your quality of life, that we can then start to nail down and understand where it's coming from. So I think it's two-part, right? One is the driver there that I can actually resonate with you on a personal level. And then two, what is that goal so we can actually start to work towards it? Because you and me might get along, but you're not paying for me to be a friend. We want to get some sort of result along the way. So let's just get an idea of building that into the game plan as well.
That's definitely a very important thing when working with a client or a coach. For those listening, is you may definitely get along, but they're here to help you deliver an outcome. So sometimes there are going to be tough conversations, or you might get called out on things that, once again, is uncomfortable. But the reason why everyone's there is to get the best out of you for what you're working towards. What do you feel we're missing that is making it so hard to fit health into our lives at the moment?
I think what's missing is that we still think we should do it rather than have, like, we're shooting all over the floor, right? We're thinking about all the things we have to do rather than we want to do. And I think that real shift is where we start to get rid of the bullshit, right? Like, when we start to look at this through the lens of, why do you actually want to change? Or is it something that just looks as a nice to have? There are so many supplements and products and gym memberships out there that are literally built on your ability to feel better because you paid for it, right? A gym membership for now, the City Fitness over here is one that, they're $7 a week. It's the exact amount that you don't actually care if you don't go to the gym for, that they basically built their entire membership on it. Good Life Fitness is the same, Platinum Fitness is the same, as they're literally building their business model around people that will only come once a week or might actually miss 3 months in a row, which means the equipment never gets used, and it's there's very few people in the gym. So going down that tangent for a reason is that we want to understand what that true driver is, and we want to see how it's going to improve your life. And if it's just I should need to change, I've been a PT long enough to know, or coach long enough to know, that I can't want it more than you, right? I can bring out that internal drive. I can make sure that we keep pushing on the things we need. We really have a driver, have a value behind. But if you're just telling me the fluff on the call, you can pick that out pretty quickly. All right. So I think the biggest resistance for most people, and I think this is probably a bigger one, is that we beat ourselves up for not achieving something as a personal dig rather than beating ourselves up for the approach we use, right? All of us seem to dive into the new All Blacks, workout program or the new diet when we've gone. You can't go from couch potato to All Black overnight, right? Like, it needs to be an idea of what is that first step. Maybe we just get our bum out the door for 10 minutes, right? Maybe it's a quick stretch before bed. Maybe it's just getting some water in. If you can't nail the basics, nothing fancy is going to work. And it's just taking the time to build up those steps. And I think there's a whole level of guilt, shame, perfectionism, and all of that stuff to unpack there, to just get an idea of, like, let's build the first rung. Let's make you feel awesome on that first step, and then find the next one. So I'm going to keep circling back and refining my answer here, dude. But getting an idea of I think the question as a whole is, most people are focusing on the outcome and building outcome goals rather than action goals. And until we get an idea of how we feel in the process, the outcome really doesn't matter. And what I mean by that is, if my goal, and I set a goal of saying I want to run, a marathon, right? My real goal is I want to feel strong, I want to feel fit, I want to feel fucking unstoppable at work, But if I don't take that time to understand that's exactly why I'm doing it, then I focus on just achieving the goal. I have sore knees, I feel unmotivated, I'm aching and popping every time I get off the seat, rather than focusing on how I feel and now starting to create anchors around what that looks like. Maybe there's a quick stretch in the morning. Maybe there's a cold shower. Maybe there's just a high-quality breakfast. And just iterative making these little steps. And I think that's a really, really important adjustment that I've really reinforced in the last couple of years. As you know from following me on Instagram, is I had a pretty big motorbike crash a couple of years ago. And that completely took me off track of what my physical goal or outcome goal was at the time. But 3 days after surgery, I was back at the gym. Like I was like, well, let's see what I can move. I'm still banged up. Half the things don't move anymore. But taking the time to focus on how I feel and just how anchored those things were. If I was just focusing on the outcome, I'd be depressed about how much I'd lost in such a short amount of time through just a stupid little mistake. But when I'm focusing on, these are just daily actions that I've committed to doing every single day, and if my arm's falling off, I'm going to feel better because of it, right? And I think that just creates an unshakable consistency that, above nothing else, is going to make a huge difference.
That was a beautiful answer. That was amazing. A lot of people, when I talk about how frequently I move, it's, my exercise program, I'm moving every day because I experience benefits for my mental well-being. I feel confident, I feel strong, and the intensity changes, or what the specific daily exercise is, also changes depending on how my body's feeling, my recovery, and tying in nutrition, sleep, hydration, mobility into the outcome, because I understand there's no point me being extremely strong if I can't squat full range, or there's no point me training the house down if my nutrition is completely rubbish or my sleep is off. And I wish I knew this when I was a athlete, but I've only learned this in the last 5-6 years when I got into CrossFit and various other, started hanging around coaches like yourself, where I got to hear these ideas around why it's so important and how it actually adds value to. And it's about the process of doing these consistently and what they give you, more so than going, look, if I can bench 100, I'm worthy. I'm a real man. I'm, going to be successful in my career. So, well, it doesn't matter as long as you're doing these things consistently and they're allowing you to gain the outcomes that you want from your life. What do you feel, aside from obviously that time being an issue of why people don't fit these things into their life, for, I guess, the male clientele that you work with, what are some of the other hurdles that get in the way for those high performing men around why they maybe neglect their health or their sleep or their nutrition?
It's actually quite similar male to female, but the way males tend to approach it is it's always about moving more, right? And it's about trying to make sure that, and I think it has a huge impact, but if we're not taking the time to look at getting the body back in our side first, taking the time to feel like we're actually working together, right? Rather than battling our body to make the changes. I think that shift, as you know, tends to happen around sort of our 30s or mid 30s. And we just start to feel like things aren't working the same way. And I think we tend to, if we bring it in with a masculine nature, is we tend to force that body to work the same way rather than intelligently making some adjustments to train it differently, right? And I think there's a space where, as you said before, there's a external gratification of lifting a dumbbell up and down or doing an F45 class or whatever that looks like. But what's actually going to what does that actually look like for you? And is it building you up or breaking you down? I think it's a really simple question to ask. When you were 20 and you did a full 2-hour leg workout, you were buggered for a couple of hours, but you didn't really have much else in your day and you got back to it. If you do that now, you're tired all day, you're creaky and nothing really works in the next couple of days. Was that actually beneficial, or did it dig a bigger hole than you could recover from, right? And I think just taking the time to adjust how we move, how we approach health in general, as being less of a challenging our body to break and more of a case of how can we assist it to feel good on a day-to-day basis, I think makes a really big difference. It's either that from a challenge or competitive space, or it's more an internal self-doubt or guilt or shame around what we can't do, that we could do 20 years ago. And I think taking the time to look at that in a way that we're trying to build the best 55-year-old version of you, not get back to the 20-year-old version, I think is a really, really good way to look at it, because there's a level of skin, elasticity and all the rest that we're not going to get back. But it's also just getting an idea of, if you're looking at it through the frame of what used to be, you're not really getting an idea of paying attention to what's happening now, right? It's just coming back to being present. And I think that starts to look at it quite differently.
You speak about building our bodies to be the best 55-year-old version of ourselves. What are some of those things that we should be doing, especially once we're, approaching 40 and beyond?
Yeah. I want to answer this in a different way, because I think the biggest shift that we see, or at least in my world I see as being a problem, is we're still thinking about one, the outcome goals we just talked about, but two, sort of the external, like what's moving, right? What I mean by that is, as we get, if we go for a run, right, we can drop some body fat. But if we continue to run, we get less efficient at dropping body fat and we get more efficient at running, right? We just get better at running. Now, if we're doing it for mental health, then 100% keep doing it. But if we're looking at it through the body composition lens, right, and again, this comes back to clarifying the goal. If the goal is body composition, something like weight training, as we get less efficient as a human overall, we get more effective at contracting muscles. And what I mean by that is, if I go for a gym workout with my brother and he's trying to keep up with me on some sort of like dumbbell curl, for example, right? He's using his shoulders, he's using his hips, he's doing anything to get that dumbbell up, right? I might use the exact same weight, but I'm getting 2, maybe 3 times the muscle contraction in that movement because I've built the skill of contracting muscles. And just taking that time to acquire a skill and understanding that I can be more effective in a 20-minute workout than most people are in an hour and a half starts to get you to really lean into that lens of being an effective human in the way you're exercising, getting an idea of what the outcome you're really after is, rather than, we said over here with Les Mills classes, is they're absolutely focused more on the enjoyment of a workout rather than necessarily results, right? So you can absolutely still enjoy it, but you're enjoying it for the result you get out of the workout. And this is where you get to that sort of athletic space of leaning into the pain, enjoying the lactic acid, having a really good workout because you're hobbling out of the gym. And I think that's a fantastic feeling to harness, especially when you're in your 40s and 50s, where you feel like you couldn't do it again, right? But you're doing it in a very different way. You're not running 40 Ks. You're not doing some circuit class. You're working with how your body's supposed to operate and contracting things harder. So in a training space, that becomes a really easy example to just understand, like, what does that look like for you in a exercise space? Is it simply building you up or is it breaking you down? Nutritionally, same thing, right? Are you there trying to, force the body to change by dropping the beers for a couple of weeks and just, counting out your leaves and almonds? Or are you taking that time to support how your body feels on a day-to-day basis so you're focused, you're productive, you don't feel like you need to kind of, demolish the cupboard when you get home? It's just a mindset around actually supporting the body rather than forcing it to change. And when you're working through that process and you feel like your body's actually along for the ride, you're certainly going to have a lot more results long term. You're going to enjoy it a bit more.
So talking about supporting your body to obviously have the energy and vitality, etc., for people in the high business, or high performing roles, what would be some of those things that they should be focusing on from your experience as well? And obviously even for yourself as you continue to grow your company.
Yeah, I think the biggest one is now the first 20 minutes, and it's very hard to stuff up the rest of the day. I think that's a really good way to look at it, is just owning the morning, because it's so easy for us to get locked into looking at the emails, looking after the kids, diving right into what's everyone else doing before we've actually checked in with us. If you've got no time in the morning, get up earlier. Take the time to just anchor in that space. I think makes a really big difference to that morning routine. I do say get up earlier in a naturally masculine way, but I think the best way to look at this a bit differently is the best alarm you could ever set is the one at night, right? Like if you need to get up at 6 a.m., stop trying to get up at 6 by setting an alarm. Try set the alarm at 9 p.m. so you've actually got some time to set up the day tomorrow better. And I think that's a really good way to look at, really tying back what we talked about before with bringing health and business into the same light, is understanding that we're especially today's world, we're focused so much on being more productive, but we've got no capacity to be productive in the first place. So how I look at it is, if we're focusing on being productive at work, what we're doing with our health is creating the capacity to be productive in the first instance. If we don't have that health space to start with, we're simply running off, V's or caffeine or whatever that needs to be to get through today, and we're dragging the energy out of tomorrow, which means by the time we get to Saturday, we've got absolutely nothing left. That's where we have the extra beers. That's where we've got the burgers and the pizzas, trying to fill that hole, which ultimately is a lack of self-care from the week you've just gone through. So I love that morning routine aspect. Again, it doesn't need to be a 2-hour meditation on the mountaintop. It's just what fills your cup in the morning so you can show up your best. Because very much what we see, if you're always having a big dinner, you're digging into the ice cream, whatever that looks like on a Friday night, Saturday, or just every day of the week, it's a lot less to do with the food or a hunger cue, and it's a lot more to do with the lack of fitting you into your day throughout the day. Because if you've gone for a walk, you've had a great breakfast, you've had a good workout in there's a level of momentum that just changed that whole circumstance, right? I know for a fact that if I'm in that space where I've burnt myself out all week, I haven't really given myself a break, I've been inside just working away, and you put a cake in front of me, Ollie eats the cake, right? It doesn't matter how disciplined Ollie thinks he is, he eats the cake. But if I'm in a space where I feel like I'm smashed the momentum, I'm getting leaner, I'm seeing progress, I'm eating really well, you put the cake in front of me, I'm like, I don't actually feel like eating it at all, right? I'm good. So it's got nothing to do with hunger. It's got nothing to do with discipline in the moment, but it's the framing of the week as a whole.
That is beautiful, having those actionable steps. I know even for myself, if I'm going out for a weekend barbecue or something like that, I always make sure I, train, I'm doing my exercise daily. And by the time you get there, you're like, no, I wouldn't mind 1 or 2 beers, but there's no way I'm going to punch back a bucket load. But if, for example, I had been neglecting my training, I'm definitely more inclined to go, I'll start Monday and carry on.
You're halfway down the spiral already, like
exactly.
It's just, you know where you are in that point. And I think that's a really great space to get to is, I track a fair few things, as you can imagine, with an Aura ring or, whatever your version is of recovery.
The Whoop at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, nice. I haven't used that one yet. I have to get both and I'll be fully cyborg. But looking at it through the space of, okay, I know that if I have, 2 beers, I'm good tomorrow. If I go over that limit of 2, I know that I'm feeling worse tomorrow. And just getting an idea of what that pulse check looks like for you, right? Most people are still smashing back a bottle a night and don't realize it makes any difference to their health, right? And every time they take that out, yes, they drop some body fat, but the amount of emotional awareness, focus and productivity and just connection with their partner and all of these things that come through are so important that they really start to feel. But it really just comes back to finding that personal threshold that allows you to show up. And I think when you have that game plan, you have that personal blueprint, you know what that threshold is to really show up as an effective human.
What would you say to those, if you were to say to them, hey, you should track this, or maybe start checking to see how you feel after a few beers the night before, or the foods that you eat, how do you feel after eating cake as opposed to a high protein meal? The people who turn around and say, look, I just don't have time for that, or that's just too extreme for what I want. What would be, I guess, a response to those people?
Totally. You want the PG response? No. Where I start, if I'm looking at it through a productivity lens, right? And if I'm talking to a business owner, let's start there, is I'm going to look at your day and break it down into half an hour increments to get an idea of how effective you actually are being, right? Because most people, when it comes down to their day, are spending way too much time on shit that does not matter, right? Like there is 1% of your day that actually needs to get moved forward. Like I said before I jumped on today, I've spent the whole day on one task that I knew that if I just got that one thing kicked off today, my day was successful, right? Like no other noise. And that's been very intentionally built over a very long time to get to that point, to make sure that I knew what my biggest lever was for the day. Now, people will absolutely resist me on that of like, I don't have the time to document down what I'm doing in every half an hour of my day. And my response to that is exactly because you don't have the time to do it, right? I have done a Sunday review on my entire week for about 6 years, and I think it's the most productive thing I do of my week ever. When we start to understand that whether you're Bill Gates or Elon or whoever it might be, they've got the same 24 hours, right? So what they're doing is not more work. There's a level of leverage that you're not harnessing. So maybe there's an adjustment of your business model that needs to change, or it's you're just being a reactive monkey, not taking the time to control your own brain. So there's a level of just refining the axe, sharpening the axe before you start swinging that needs to happen. And whether you're looking at that through a business space or whether you're looking at it how you fuel the day, which simply becomes part of that, I think the discussion is the same. And it's having the conversation of getting out of the reactive business owner mindset or whatever work space you're in to really take the time to sharpen that axe first.
Very well said. Very well said. For those who, and I know you're on a time schedule, but for those who want to, can you give us a bit of a rundown on the Body Reset program that you facilitate, your team facilitate, how that all works and everything like that?
Yeah, man, absolutely. I'm only thing I've got left to do today is work out and spend some time with the family. So I'm absolutely here for you, whatever you want to dive into.
Oh, perfect.
But how we approach it, there's so much stuff that we can dive into. But as I had a discussion with our main coaches, the goal for us is to really simplify it into a framework. And the framework does not mean that the same person gets everything, but it allows you to make sure that we approach it in a way that we're starting with what's not just accurate, but relevant. And I think that's a really, really important thing, especially for men that are still using plans that worked for them 20 years ago, right? It's really, really hard to sift through the 99% to find the 1% that's actually accurate. And I think that's a space that all coaches do really well on. He's like, you need to know the information, right? But I think the problem is we're now at this point where information is no longer the issue. It's what's actually relevant to my age and stage of life, all right? So that's the second tier that we really focus on, is just taking the time to create a framework of knowing what to start on, in what order, so we can really build you up with a level of momentum that we know what's coming before you do, to just continue to build that sequence and progression over time, all right? So how we do that, what we call it is our R4 method. We break them down into 4 phases there. R1 is very much our reset. The big goal for us right away is energy and sleep, right? It's refining, as you mentioned before, that recovery piece. Because if we're just smashing everything every day, we're not going to have anything left in the cup, right? Taking the time to repair that and understanding that any effective high-performance athlete on the planet, if they take themselves seriously, they're focusing on recovery better than the others. It's not that they're pushing harder in the gym every single day. It's because they're focusing harder on recovery and they're able to bounce back tomorrow. So that's very much where we start, just taking the time, as we talked about today, to look at shifting the approach so you're not beating yourself up for why it's not working. You're focusing on a better approach, all right? R2 for us, this is where we start to go really deep. This is where we start to get a couple more specialists involved. So this is what we call identifying the health anchors and taking the time to look at a very basic level, gut, liver, thyroid, and hormone. What's actually happening? How do we support that process to get your body back on your side? And those two alone, a phrase we use a ton, is just taking the time to fix the gut. And when we do, it's like starting the race with a Ferrari instead of a unicycle, right? It's taking the time to get your body working.
Yep.
Because most people, when they try start a health journey, they're starting from a point that they feel tired, they feel burnt out, and their body can't do anything. And then the first thing they do, they go exercise more, right? They're just burning the candle from both ends. So the reason we approach it in that way is just taking the time to build that body up, get those things back on its side, and then we can really play the quantity game, quality over quantity game with our restore and reinforce portions later on, and what that actually looks like as a bit of a progression. All right. So I think that's the key shift, is just taking the time, hopefully from today's conversation, to look at it through the lens of getting your body back on your side. And if you haven't done a high level overview of your blood work, diving into what that looks like, with a specialist is actually switched on beyond your GP to understand what's not just normal, but you're actually optimal and working for you, I think it's a really, really big step, especially if you've seen your body go through those shifts, and just understanding how you can support that there before you start trying to push the training harder.
Talk about some of those shifts that the body goes through, especially as we are, creeping up to our 40s and beyond. If you're in a position where you feel, or I think we were saying 30 or 35, you start noticing more creaks and your body is slowing down, is the best place to start with that recovery phase, so the sleep and hydration. Is that where you'd recommend starting as well?
100%. If there was something to focus on, I'll give any listener a really easy way to start, and it's intentionally built this way. Is one, if we are going to look at through exercise, I want you to do 10 minutes a day, right? And straight away, everyone's going to say, I'm trying to find an hour. And I'm like, exactly. That's why you're not getting it in, right? If you look for an hour and a half, you won't find it. If I ask you for 10 minutes, you'll find it everywhere, and you actually do it, right? So just taking the time to build that up. I'd much rather have a 10 minutes every day than a 1.5 once, So that, from an exercise lens, I think is more than enough. Just taking the time to move that quick 10 minutes between work meetings to actually break up your day. I couldn't care less if you did a hard, 30-minute spin class, if you just sit on your bum for 16 hours afterwards, right? Just taking the time to get that body moving. Second, hit your 30 mils per kilo of body weight. Hopefully most of you are in New Zealand Aussie, or we got
a fair big audience in America as well.
Yeah, got it. So obviously, if you're from the US, tough. You finally got to work with what we have for years and move it from pounds back to kilos. I think it's literally still the best metric. I don't think there's a better one for pounds anyway. It's literally 30 mils per kilo of body weight needs to be your threshold. So if you're a 100-kilo human, we're hitting those 3 liters a day. And we see this on the food and the water or hydration side all of the time. Is we've had clients, lose a 10, 15, 20, 25 kilos while eating more food. It's never a process of just starving your body and backing yourself into a corner of not eating anything. It's about supporting your body to actually change. And a big part of that is hitting those key threshold points, a protein target, a water target. So you just understand what that looks like for you to perform as your best, so your body's actually on your side. So that might be an easy way to look at it, but I think looking at it through the lens of water, really good place to start. The third one here would be just getting greens with 2 meals a day, right? As soon as I start traveling, it's the first thing to go and I feel terrible. And that's where you start to really fill that gap with carbohydrates. You can work right towards a fiber intake target. And I think, even the people that feel they're more, fitness aware in this space, tracking a fiber target is something that very few people haven't done. I didn't do it for a very long time. is, we know what our protein is, we know what our carbs are, we have no idea how much fiber we're having in a day. And if we're not hitting 20 to 25 grams of carbs of fiber a day, we're getting to a point where there'll be some level of digestive upset. There'll likely be more inflammation in the body. You'll notice that the foods just go straight through you. All of that great stuff that just doesn't make you feel so good, right? So starting with just simply 2 green meals a day and then sort of building up from there, I think makes a really big difference. And then the last one, as you mentioned before, is get an idea of your alcohol targets, right? If it's a once a week or a once every second week, great. If it's an every night thing, it's ruining everything under the sun, right? Sleep quality, recovery, emotional awareness, fat loss, and everything in between. There's a disruptive nature there. There's no benefits. I think there's a real trend happening at the moment about longevity and adding in your red wine for longevity. If you're not in a space where you're already healthy, it's absolute horseshit. Get the alcohol out, give yourself time to actually rebuild that tissue and get your body back in a good spot so you're actually feeling great, and then we can absolutely have that discussion. But it's starting with a key baseline and going from there.
I love that your approach is really just getting, because what you can do to support your body, and obviously we need to get ourselves to that foundation, and you talk about earlier just not neglecting the fundamental things, whether it's with diet, movement, because they are the things that, if done consistently and repetitively, are going to deliver the results that you're looking for. It's very easy to want to do a rapid, quick, detox, or find some crazy exercise through Instagram that you think's going to add more bloody load to your chest. And you're like, dude, it's always been, and it will always continue to be, the fundamental movements. Obviously, just tailor them into your lifestyle and work with experts like yourself or your team that can help you with the stage of life that you're in and what you're looking to achieve.
100%, man. I hope what I'm going through today makes sense and is valuable for listeners, because I don't think it's beneficial to jump on here and dive into all of the scientific topics and the adjustments of mTOR and AMPK and all the shit that really doesn't make a difference in the real world. And I think taking the time to look at, especially through the lens of as a business owner, we get so good at delegating things at work, and then we think that we need to stroke our ego by doing health ourselves. And I think when we take that time to look at what you're doing is just adding more information to your plate that you now need to delegate or digest and sort and do all the stuff that at work you would flick it off in an instant. It's taking the time to just know that you're focusing on the right thing in the right order at the right time. And if you're not taking the time to be intelligent about that, I think it makes a really big difference. An example I use all the time, I'm quite open that I use a chef once a week or every second week to just cook the meals for the week. It's not like he's here for every meal of the day, but he'll prep out what that looks like for most of my lunches for a week. Now, most people are like, I won't get a chef. But the first thing I'll do is I'll get a gardener, or I'll get someone to be my EA, or whatever that thing is. The whole point of doing that is to remove the lowest value tasks off your list so you can focus on the highest value tasks. Now, if you're focusing on a Sunday to do all your meal prep and you enjoy it, fantastic. If you don't and you always hate it, and you get to Wednesday and you're eating out, and not only is it a time allocation, but it's now a lack of productivity because you're feeling foggy off the meal you just ate, that feels like a really nice place to tackle, So I think there's a lot of resistance in spaces like that where we're just challenging norms to take the time to look at your calendar and your bank statement are the two things that are going to tell me everything about you, right? What's actually important to you. And if you're only spending that on beers on the weekend and tickets to a footy game, and you're not taking the time to look after you, there's a pretty good place to start to shift that. And I think it's an iterative process, of course, but it's taking the time to look at it as a full integrative, what do you really want out of life, rather than let's just train harder in the corner, because we're looking at such a fraction of what's actually going on.
Olly, it's been an amazing chat. I'm definitely going to be flicking through your website, but where else can people reach out to you, consume more of your content, and find out more about what you do?
Yeah, man. Sorry, I hope this is being helpful. I've been going off on all my rants, but
it's been amazing. I've got all these notes down here of things that I want to, I'm very privileged that I get to sit here and listen to this, and I've obviously had a good stalk of all your website and Instagram, but now there's already so many things that I'm like, I need to look into more about what you do there and all of that. So it's been incredible.
I appreciate it, dude. Well, if anyone wants to dive into this more, hopefully you can tell from today, I'm all about just taking really scientific topics and diving into what that looks like as just simple, actionable steps you can actually apply. So if you want to know what that looks like and actually create it a bit more real for you, I think the best place to start would just be go to thebodyreset.online, scroll onto our main page and look at our 5-day challenge. It's absolutely free. There's a male and female version because there's some nuances we work with there. And it'll walk you through a full 5-day challenge to really understand what those action steps look like. They're max 10-minute videos. They give you worksheets and PDFs and downloads and all the stuff to just make this easier for you, get the thinking taken out of it, and get you to apply some things to your life and see what works for you. I think that'd be a great place to start if you actually want some real resources. If you're just around to do what Lachlan's doing and see what I'm doing in my life, then something like Instagram's probably an easy way to see what that looks like. Just Olly Wood NZ is my handle there. And I finally worked out what handle means, your URL,
yep.
To make sure that you can, kind of be part of our world, and hopefully I can help you along the way.
Awesome. It's been bloody amazing learning from you and listening to. And for everyone listening along, all the links that Olly has just mentioned are in the notes there below. So it's easily reachable for you. You don't have to go type it in yourself. Thank you so much for your time, Olly.
No worries, dude. I love your question.